So our next topic is going to be discussing the practical approach of implementing education in Japan as a foreigner, having children here in the system.
So our qualifications are that you have 2 children?
Three.
3.
Yes.
It's 3 children. 3 children. I have almost 1.
Okay. So you got to.
I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting.
You've got a bun in the oven.
There's a bun in the oven. Yeah.
Okay.
And so I'm really worried about what I'm going to do. I think I have a basic game plan for the first 5 or 6 years, but then after that, I don't know. And so I'm wondering what your solution.
Okay. Well, my approach is that, there are a lot of expats in Japan that tend to send their children to foreign schools, American schools, or I've even seen some that send them to, German or French schools, so that they could have some exposure to another language. But I personally have, taken the approach of putting my children in the Japanese system, so that they can be fluent in Japanese to a much higher degree than you would be able to attain through these the foreign schools here, and also so that they because my children are half Japanese, and I want them to have a deeper and a deeper appreciation for the educational system here. Because actually, to be honest, in the primary level educational system here, there is a lot more. I would say, coming from the States and seeing both systems, and it's different if you go into Europe, and of course every region has its approach. But in Japan, I find that the primary school system does a very good job at getting the children engaged and interested in just all different types of subjects, and it's done in a very hands-on way. For example, botany. They have kids actually, getting into soil and planting seeds and watching them sprout and germinate and grow and going through that whole process and learning, each phase and each step of that as they're, physically engaged in that. And I mean, a lot of the differences we've covered in previous episodes, but there tends to be more of a stronger focus on rote memory and things like this. But I think that there's significant value in that. Japanese children are required actually to do more than their counterparts. I think in the States, especially.
My impression is some of the extracurricular, like the extracurricular activities are somewhat mandatory, in the sense that you have to do one.
Well,
this is the impression I get. Sorry, from my relatives and stuff, that they have to do something.
Yeah,
they can choose.
Once you get into middle school, that's the case. You do have to sort of you'll have to join, band or whatnot, and orchestra or whatever. You have to get into the extracurriculars, baseball or whatever it is. But I think and actually, I don't know as much about the middle school system or the high school system, because my children are all are still in their primary stage. So, but my approach is this, and it's that even if we were in the States, I would still have the same sort of perspective, in that I believe education starts with the family. It starts at home with the parents. That's where the obligation or the requirement or the necessity of imbuing knowledge into your child exists, and I think that you can't rely on the system to educate your children. I think in doing so, that's kind of like the babysitter approach to education, and I'm just not a big fan of that. So what we do is, for our children, of course, we want them to be native speakers of Japanese. This is why we've got them in Japanese school. But I also want them to have native level English and Mandarin. So we have a rule in the house that there is no Japanese spoken. And we force the children to speak English in the house. And they also study a foreign language 1 hour a day. Okay. So right now, for example, we've got them doing 1 hour of Mandarin, and then the next day doing an hour of another language of their own choice.
Okay.
So right now, for example, my youngest is studying Italian, and my middle child's studying French, and they're actually getting pretty good at it.
Wow.
So, and then also, I make them do translation work as well. So they have to, a full B5 page of translation. So they have a book in Japanese or English, and then we make them go through and translate a full page every day.
Okay. When do they sleep?
Oh, they have plenty of time.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, because they get out of school 3-ish.
Okay.
So they come home, they do an hour of language, they do about an hour of translation. It doesn't take that long. At first it takes a while, but then they get used to it. But I tell you what, trying to get them to read in English is a task if you're not consistent. And that's the problem, is that they don't get the vocabulary because they're not exposed to that at school, and just in daily conversation you're not bringing up certain subjects or topics that are going to allow them to have exposure to that sort of set of vocabulary that's associated with it. So getting them to do these translations forces them to learn how to spell. It forces them to learn how to use references like dictionaries and the internet and whatnot to learn how to phrase things appropriately. And also, we do the translation, but sometimes we just get them to do diaries in another language, right? They have to write in English a diary for if we've gone on some kind of a trip, or if there's some activity that they've just completed. That's it. And we're back.
Yeah, you were saying if they've just gone back from it.
Yeah, so if they had something eventful, and then they can they can choose or opt to do a diary, or what we call a nikki in Japanese, right? And then, of course, I tend to do sort of like supplemental work with them for mathematics.
Okay.
The way that I've done it so far is, there are a number of very useful materials for these kind of supplemental studies in Japanese libraries and also in bookstores. You can buy sort of, I guess it's sort of like the juku approach to learning, but we buy the book and then we get them to do exercises out of it, and I go through explaining them, the concepts behind it. And I think that because we've done that, they've been able to sort of excel beyond their current year. I mean, the discipline in ensuring that they speak English in a native language, and also that they can read at their native level. For example, my eldest daughter, she's 13, and she's already reading university level material. So it's very beneficial, and I think that that's the thing with children. Most children are naturally to anything that requires a level of discipline, right? They're lazy. Naturally, they're lazy, and but the thing is the parents. As a parent, you have the obligation to raise your children to have patience, to learn patience, to learn how to strive to complete things, to see things through to completion, at a high level of quality. Children are not going to be doing that naturally. But the thing is, that translates, I believe that's going to translate into a successful future for them, because they're going to be equipped with discipline that other students, and again, the Juku system tends to do that for the families in Japan, which is Juku and
cram school.
Cram school, there you go. So there are disciplines that are learned or gained through that system. But I think, for me as a father, it's been quite a journey to be able to work with my children. If my parents had done that with me, I probably would have ended up at MIT. Because I was very good at mathematics very early on, and very scientifically oriented, and but I was lazy, and You're not going to get into MIT being lazy,
No,
unfortunately.
or unless you're really rich,
This is true. This is true.
you can get anywhere.
So that's the thing. I want to enable them to have those choices. It doesn't mean that they have to take that path. It just means that if they have the opportunity available to them, then they're going to be enabled for that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I'm glad you talked about it, because I'm still trying to figure out what to do. I think I've decided definitely at least the first part of primary school to like grade 1 or 2, at least that in a Japanese school, because I think just picking up the fundamentals of the language and fundamentals of interacting with.
Well, I'll tell you, the fundamentals of the language at that in just the first 2 years of school is not going to suffice.
No, no, but I'm saying that is like the fundamentals of the sort of interacting with someone their own age.
Yeah.
I've actually been really impressed. It used to be like homeschooling was only for like religious nuts.
Yeah.
And I've actually been, there's a lot of people doing homeschool, not religious nuts. I mean, there are religious nuts too,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of people who aren't religious nuts doing homeschooling in Japan. Sometimes because they're just kind of nutty hippies.
Yeah.
Sometimes because they can't afford a private school, or, I mean, American school in Japan is a few million a year.
If you have the time, then that's a great approach.
Yeah. So I mean, this is the thing. Is I think, I mean, I luckily I can put this decision off for a few years, and luckily with my family there doesn't seem to be a lot of pressure to get into the best yochien or anything like that.
Yeah. Now, when I was in the States, we homeschooled, so I did make sure that we had the children at home, and I mean, we also send them off to activities so that they were interacting with.
Well, I know. I think that's really important. I mean,
Yeah.
when I say homeschool, I don't mean like house arrest.
Right. Of course.
And I think a lot of it's just it's actually I think discipline comes naturally with interest, and one of the things I see in people a lot, just everywhere, is that they can't even identify what their own interests are, and I think that's a big issue. And so one thing I want to impress upon my children, we'll see, is that they have this. I mean, you're sort of giving them this broad opportunity. I want to do the same thing, but the idea is that when there's an interest found, that we can pursue it to its to as advanced a level as the child wants to go.
Then you might be interested in sort of like the Montessori approach of education, because that's the way that they tend to do it.
Yeah.
It really literally is that they believe, the philosophy is that you believe that through pursuing interests, eventually you will cover a broad enough base of material that
if you want to look at the stars, you need to know math. If you want to do that seriously, if you want to do, and of course, else you have to learn the language. So you can't do that if you can't speak the language. You can't talk to the experts in the field unless you have a way to communicate with them. So, I think that's I think.
And I think that's great, and I think that works for certain individuals, and I of course encourage my children to pursue their own interests and things that I'm always. For example, my son, he loves bugs and whatnot, and we buy him all kinds of material to learn about the different types of in Japan actually that's kind of a very popular thing.
Yeah, with the little terrariums and the rhinoceros beetles. And,
the kabutomushi, which we've done, and he loves it. And then also, that kind of branched off into, types of fish and just other, taxonomies and whatnot. But I think that's good, but I personally believe that there are subjects that need to be addressed that would not naturally be addressed because they just may not have interest in it ever. And those are the areas that sort of require guidance and a bit of externally imposed discipline because if you think about this, okay? If you enter into the working world, and not everyone is fortunate enough to be doing what it is they want to do
Right.
for a living, and especially in the earlier years of your career, you tend to be working for the man, and to be successful in that type of environment, you often have to have the discipline to complete things with a high level of or a high degree of dedication to quality. And a lot of times you may not be interested entirely in the subject matter or at the task at hand. And what I've seen is that people who aren't disciplined will be lazy, will procrastinate, and end up with sort of suboptimal results in those areas. But I think that if people, and this is getting very philosophical, but I think that if people from an early age have an influence, and it's a positive influence, it's not slave driving, it's not, but have an influence to learn how to overcome the internal sort of laziness with regards to things you're not interested in but a need to do, then it's going to help facilitate better decisions and better behavior or better habits at a later time in life.
Although, I mean, I personally think a lot of that is linked to really actually knowing what you want to do, not just sort of thinking something might be nice, but actually having specific goals. And I think, because I think a lot of people that you're talking about aren't even necessarily lazy. It's just their goal is something vague, like, oh, I want to be rich. But how do you if that's your only goal in life, I think you're going to have a pretty boring life.
Yeah.
I mean, like, okay, there's maybe five people and a bunch of Russian gangsters who can make that their goal and succeed, but the rest of us, I mean, we have to find something we can be happy doing. It's, what would you be happy doing if there wasn't any money?
Yeah.
And I think being clear on that goal does something with the. But I think maybe you're right that it depends on the type of person. And I think for me, I'm going to have to wait and see in terms of how I am as if we do homeschooling, how I am as a home educator, how the child is in terms of.
Every child has their own personality, and they'll have their own capabilities. Some of them will be better at linguistics or language arts. Some of them will be better at the more logical, in sciences and whatnot. And actually, I've seen that even with my own children. Some of them are more naturally inclined to mathematics, and while the other ones are more artistic. And we encourage them to pursue their strengths in that regard and to develop themselves in that vein. But at the same time, like my middle daughter, she's very artistic. She's terrible at math. And she hates it, or she hated it to begin with. But I continued to pressure her to challenge herself to master the material. Because there's a sense of accomplishment that's achieved when you do that, when you push yourself to learn something that is maybe initially beyond your own scope of capability, that once you see it through and you see, wow, actually that's not as complicated as it originally, or as daunting as it originally appeared to me. I mean, for example, when and I know this, a lot of people, when they first approach calculus, they feel, oh gosh, this is, look at the formulas that they're using, or a lot of the notation that's used in calculus actually kind of belies the simplicity of the constructs that it's representing, or the mechanisms that it represents.
I'll take your word for it. I didn't have to do calculus. I barely made it through grade 12 math.
Oh, okay. But I mean, for example, if I were to tell you this, all calculus is determining the tangent of a slope, if we're talking about differential calculus. Okay, all it is, it's just determining you've got a slope and you're trying to find a formula for the tangent at any point on that slope, and that's all it is. And you can use that, of course, and apply that to very huge, very wide, number of fields, maximization problems and all types of things. Even economics, and it has applications everywhere. But the thing is that people, when they first come to it, it just, because of the notation, it's unfamiliar, and just because it just seems like this high heady type of highbrow material. But once you really understand the basis of it, you're just like, God, that's so simple, and it's really easy. And then you can really, And I think if you teach it too, it depends on how it's taught to you. I mean, a lot of bad teachers out there to just throw it at your face.
I think it also matters on your perspective, because I mean, one of the reasons I started to do poorly in math is because once you start getting to the more advanced stuff, it has less and less bearing on anything that I was interested in doing. Because, like, for instance, with calculus, I'm more interested in the argument over who invented it than I am about calculus itself.
Yeah,
right? I find that fascinating.
Yeah.
And
well, was it Leibniz or was it Newton? Apparently,
it was both of them at the same time. Yeah. So I mean, that I think so. It has to do to a certain degree with the person, like how far they're going to be able to pursue a particular subject.
Yeah,
I think but
I think that to challenge yourself to learn something that's not comfortable for you, even for me, okay, for like what's a subject that I consider uncomfortable just simply because maybe it wasn't as interesting to me in the earlier stages of my education. I think history was probably one of them. But what I found is that the more that you learn about history, the more interesting it becomes.
Yeah.
And I would not have known that had I not been disciplined, or had I not disciplined myself to focus on it regardless of my natural inclination. So I think I was able to sort of develop that myself. But if I had someone at an early stage in my life to come in and to tutor me or to sort of guide me to do that earlier on, then I would have progressed so much further than what I have today, and I would be extremely grateful for that. And I know there are people in the world who just don't really care to do that and are happy where they are. But I'm not one of those people. And having, experienced, I guess, both sides of the equation, as it were, I know that doing that is better than not doing that.
Yeah, well, I think there's also a temptation to want your own children to be polymaths, right? Like, I think I have that feeling.
And polyglots.
Well, I would be, I think I'd be a little, not disingenuous, I'd be a little bit hypocritical if I tried to make my kid be a polyglot, given that I've been here almost a decade, and my mastery of Japanese is pathetic. I do speak French, though. I'm not a monolinguist, but I found for me language acquisition is difficult.
Okay.